what's really interesting is you see a strong similarity to what Lefebvre was doing and what Ratzinger was doing. But you see a very difference in temperament. You see Lefebvre is rather fiery in his declaration of, I believe it was 1974. So he's rather fiery and, rhetorically powerful. Lefebvre is rather, and whereas Ratzinger is very gentle, subtle, nuanced, and that sort of thing. But he's actually doing the same thing that Lefebvre is doing. Ratzinger in the 1970s. So at this time, he was a worldwide celebrity priest, academic. So his book Introduction to Christianity, for example, was a bestseller, worldwide bestseller by the 1970s. So he's well known as this celebrity priest, but he's also well known as a critic of the Novus Ordo and the abolition of the Latin Mass. Peter Zewald, in his biography, as well as this is also in Last Testament, he notes how when he was appointed bishop, everyone held their breath because they knew that he was a huge critic of the liturgical reform. But what we notice here also, what's similar to Lefebvre, is that he's a critic of hyperpapalism. Joseph Ratzinger is not just blindly following exactly what the Pope dictates and what the Pope intends. Rather, we actually see a form of recognize and resist in the figure of Joseph Ratzinger in the 1970s. Is in particular, he himself, Joseph Ratzinger, he himself put into practice regarding the Latin Mass and the Novus Ordo and the Pope in the 1970s, what he would later promulgate as prefect of the Holy Office in the document Donum Veritatis. So Donum Veritatis is a document that came from the Holy Office later on, where Joseph Ratzinger actually describes how a theologian can actually sort of recognize and resist, in a sense. He doesn't use that term, but he uses the term dialoguing and that sort of thing. But essentially, it's a theologian who disagrees with the magisterium or has a doubt about the magisterium or has some sort of beef with the magisterium. And so he has a constructive dialogue with the magisterium. And that's exactly what Joseph Ratzinger did in the 1970s. He had a constructive dialogue with Paul VI. He made clear to Paul VI that he was, as he says in Last Testament, he was on the same page with Paul VI in terms of the fact of reforming the liturgy, that the liturgy that needed to be reformed and that sort of thing. But he certainly was of a very different opinion as to how that reform was to go about. And we'll get into that in just a minute. And so what's interesting here is that Paul VI made Ratzinger a bishop and a cardinal in the same year. It was in a period of months in 1977. This is really quite remarkable. We need to emphasize the fact that it's very rare, to my knowledge, that a priest is made a bishop and then immediately a cardinal. And so Cardinal Ratzinger participated in the conclave of 1978, which elected John Paul I, and then in immediately the next conclave, which elected John Paul II as a cardinal. So we need to recognize, why is this important for trads? It's important for trads because we see that the effort today, after Traditionis Custodes, the effort today is to label our movement and marginalize us. People use various labels, and they use these labels in which it seems to be, I can't really judge their intentions, but it seems to be that they're the effect of labeling fellow Catholics like trads is to marginalize them, to say, well, these guys are fringe people, they're out to lunch, they are radical traditionalists, they're rad trads, they are schismatics, they're dissenters, whatever word they use. These are words that ultimately criticize Joseph Ratzinger himself in the 1970s. Because in a certain sense, in a certain aspect, there is this similarity to the way that Lefebvre obviously recognized and resisted Paul VI. He did so in a different way, obviously, but he was recognizing and resisting on the same topics of resistance. The Novus Ordo, the implementation, the abolition of the Latin Mass, hyperpapalism. Joseph Ratzinger was recognizing and resisting those same things, but in a much different way. Obviously a gentler way, a way that obviously won over Paul VI. He won over Paul VI to make him a bishop and cardinal. Paul VI was not afraid to make him a bishop and cardinal.